It can be said that a theocracy is man governing God, which means that theocracy is inherently legitimate. But this is not an impressive argument when debating atheists. But the greater issue is what actually does a theocracy consist of. Unfortunately, most commentators on the subject simply pass it off as secular authorities being in charge, rather than secular. But why would this be significant? Why would a person who says he or she rules in the name of a god be an improvement over someone who says they rule in the name of the people? The definition of a theocracy is a system ruled by priests in the name of a god. But what does it matter in whose name one rules? It is still man ruling man. In this sense, theocracy is just another way to legitimize the rule of a class of persons, the same as monarchy, democracy and communism are ways of legitimizing human rule. But this portrayal of theocracy as another form of government is fallacious. If men rule, God does not. At least this is true for a Christian theocracy. In a Christian theocracy, we are all under God. All humans are sinners and equal before the throne. In all human forms of government there are sharp gradients of power. A theocracy ought to be flat, insofar as power is concerned. In fact, in a theocracy the power ought to be confined to the base, as we are all equal before God. What distinctions there are ought to be operative, that is functional and tied to one's work. The key division is between God and man and between the saved and unsaved. None of this may seem important and may even seem irrelevant. But it is important to remember that all human-run institutions are based on natural law or the law of the jungle, might makes right and the end justifies the means. This being so, the more power is centralized the steeper the power gradient. More importantly, the more power there is at the center the more the ownership of property is concentrated at the top. The exercise of power and the ownership of property is tightly coordinated. The more power one has the more property one controls, though this can be in the form of direct ownership as a private owner or indirect control as is the case with public ownership. The need for power, to maintain control over property, requires property in order to have power. This is a self-reinforcing cycle. The more property, the more power, the more power, the more property one gets control over. This makes the acquisition of power addictive, which manifests as greed. Greed is as much about acquiring power as anything else. In a theocracy everything belongs to God and so God is the only one with power. Everything we have comes from God. In a theocracy we are all workers for God. What we earn is earned by working for God. We add value to the things of God. We can always add value to the things of God. God never prohibits this, therefore there is never any unemployment in a theocracy. No one has any right to anything they did not create. God created all of the natural world, therefore, everything we can see, feel, smell, hear and taste was created by God and belongs to God. All we can do is add value to the things of God. This is our work. We own the value we add to the things of God. The things of God constitute assets. The value added to assets is equity. We own equity but not assets. There is no inflation in a theocracy because no one can claim what they did not produce. No one has a claim on anything created by another. There are no liabilities in a theocracy. There is no inflation in a theocracy because no one can claim anything they did not create. Inflation exists when people make claims yet produce nothing of equal value to compensate for what they remove. There is no debt in a theocracy because debt implies a contested asset. Without conventional debt there is no interest payments, which helps to eliminate inflation, because interest payments add to the rate of inflation. Projects are funded by a simple transfer of assets. If a new school is needed, supplies and equipment are transferred to this project. Those who contribute the needed materials and labor are credited the cost. The ones who benefit from the new project are debited the cost of the construction. All donations whether of labor or materials or services earn credits. All donations to a project result in a debit to the account of the ones who benefited from the donation. This eliminates the need for banks and government currencies. A theocracy creates its own currency or unit of account. This helps to eliminate the need for debt. All conventional currencies are asset-based. Conventional currencies are a service of banks or governments, and the money they provide is an asset. Currency based on assets have value as a good and service. But money is not supposed to have value. It is only a unit of account, not a product. The fact that a theocracy creates its own money naturally and organically, not as a manufacturing process or service but as a natural element of the free market, explains why a theocracy has no debt, inflation or economic swings. It also enables the economy to remain stable even in deflationary periods. Secular economies cannot deflate without incurring economic collapse, so in a secular economy, the population that fuels demand must continue to grow, which means secular economies must always collapse, because continuous growth in population is not possible without putting serious strains on the economy, that is, the supply chain. The use of equity as a unit of account also eliminates most crime, especially robbery. Equity cannot be transferred without a corresponding entry in the account of the person receiving the credit. Every credit must have a corresponding debit. That is how accounting works, and the free market is simply a cash-based economy. A theocracy also will have less to no pollution. Because no one can claim what they did not create, the converse is also true, no one can disown what they produced, including pollution. There is no externalization of costs in a theocracy. If costs cannot be externalized onto society in future generations, there is no benefit to waste. Everything you get must be paid for, fully. Therefore, there is no benefit to wasting anything one has. This is another reason why pollution is largely eradicated. If no one wastes anything or does not get what they created, there is no job for politicians. Politicians serve only one purpose, to make one-way transfers, or in other words, to enable parasitism. The parasitic operations enable them to justify their expropriation of property. The more justice they claim to be pursuing, the more injustice that can be justified. In a system where there are no absolutes, a lesser wrong can be justified by a greater good. In fact, this is the idea behind the concept of the greater good. All evil, claim atheists, can be made legitimate by an attempt to do a greater good. If we all have to earn our own way but at the same time, get paid for all the work we do, there is no taxation, for taxation deprives the worker of his wages. We can claim this is for the greater good, but there is no greater good than paying everyone for the work that they do. The only justification for taxation, and parasitism in general, is that there is absolutely no alternative to the enacting of natural law, that is, the law of the jungle. And indeed, that without taxation human survival is not possible. The direst of consequences must threaten us, before taxation can be justified. So, many say that public works cannot be paid for without the intervention of the state. But at best the state fulfills the role of broker. The state extracts money from the population at large to pay a select group able to provide a needed good or service. But it is always a private group that does the work. The state merely serves an administrative role, at best. But if something is needed, then let those who provide what is needed, provide it, and pay them for the work they do. We only need the state to make these payments if the money we use is an asset that has to be purchased or paid for in some way. If we use equity to compensate labor, then all we are talking about is a bookkeeping entry. If we do not need taxation, we cannot need the state. Theocracy is not a state but a church. The church is the institution that makes up a theocracy, so it is the church that pays people for the work they do. The church is God's representative on earth. The church administrates assets through 12 ministries. Each ministry represents a way of working for God. These 12 ministries are, Labor Divisions 1. Defense 2. Transportation 3. Technology and Development 4. Communications 5. Energy mines and resources 6. Industry 7. Sales and services 8. Construction 9. Health and welfare 10. Education 11. Politics and justice 12. Culture. The 12 divisions of labor are divided into 12 political divisions. Political divisions 1. Coterie/small group 2. Village/neighborhood/block 3. Town/township 4. City/borough 5. District/parish 6. Municipality/section 7. County 8. Province/state 9. Region/sector 10. Nation 11. Continent/center 12. World. The labor ministries are administrated by a lower council. Each sector has its own ministry. The lower councils administrate the labor sectors. There is also a general council that administrates the political jurisdictions, including issues that impact 2 or more of the labor sectors. If one sector wants to purchase goods or services from another sector, it contracts a purchase with the relevant sector. The work done is paid for by a credit to the account of those who do the work, for the work they do. Those who receive the benefit have their account debited. It is that simple. A theocracy has 5 points. We return to God what is God's. We give to the state what is the state's, by means of a consistent and determined separation. We create a currency or accounting system based on the equity the worker creates. We pay for all work done and refuse to pay for that which does not have value for us. We create a general council to administrate our political jurisdictions and establish a lower council to govern the private sector operations. That is it. Do this and we have a theocracy. Remember, a theocracy has no unemployment, debt, poverty, inflation, pollution, waste, taxation, homelessness, war, or property crime.